Our first panel for the day is titled Courtesan, Women Performers and the Male Gaze, in which our speakers will explore the complex gender politics and negotiations of identity and power, as well as the economies of consumption within the sphere of courtesan culture and dance. We have with us Associate Professor, Center for Women's Studies at JNU, Lata Singh, and Professor of History, Baruch College, and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, Veena, Oldenburg, who will be in conversation with film critic, author, and journalist Manjula Negi.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here on a Saturday morning. And I'm Manjula, and I'm pleased to introduce Professor Veena Oldenburg and Professor Lata Singh from JNU. And we would go straight into the session. So I'd like to begin with a small quote from Asghari Bai. She was a Drupad singer, renowned Drupad singer from Mewati Gharana. Gar hote kadrda dil ke, to karte kadr is dil ki. These words resonate with the emotions of countless courtesans and tawaifs across the royal courts of India, in the pre-colonial era, And my understanding of tawaifs is that we have always seen them as the other woman, as the woman who was not respected, as somebody who has always been relegated to the fringes of the mainstream. But today, with this seminar, we wish to understand and we wish to bring to your notice that these women were once very respected. They were intellectuals. They were highly educated during their time. And they were artists of very high caliber. So we have Professor Veena Oldenburg with us. And I'd like to start with she has done a pioneering work on the courtesans as part of her feminist PhD. She did her PhD in feminist studies in Lucknow. And, So she's done her feminist studies in America, but she's been born and brought up in Lucknow. And so she went back to understand the entire feminist culture, so to speak. And she thought that it would be interesting to explore it from the perspective of the courtesans. And so I'd like to start by asking you, Veena ji, their status and positions in courts of royalty were actually, very respected. And they used to be, the highest taxpayers at one point. They had very lavish lifestyles. And they were given their due respect. So if you could give us an introduction to that whole thing, and we'd understand,
When I started my research on actually a historian, looking at colonial Lucknow, I really had no clue about the lives of the courtesans. My acquaintance with them was as superficial as anyone else's, which was through cinema and, of course, much later, the novel of Mirza Hadi Ruswa called Umrao Jan Ada. Umrao Jan Ada is the title of that book. I was looking at Lucknow archives, and I chanced upon a bundle of letters which was sealed with a red wax seal and the British stamps of the East India Company. And I asked the archivist, I said, can I open this? Because it pertains to the period I'm interested in. So he said, all right, open it. No one has opened it since 1856. Kholiye. So I opened it and saw in very beautiful Nastaliq, sort of Persianized Urdu, and I couldn't really make my way through a whole sentence because my Urdu was the written Urdu was very kacha. So I went to the Persian department and asked for a research assistant who showed up the next day at my house And it is from him, it's very ironic that he was my introduction to this. So he said, I took him to the archive, he went through the letters. He said, these are written for Wajid Ali Shah, not in his hand, but one of those very ornate and beautiful borders to each letter. He said, these are done by very professional letter writers and decorators, and they're written to the many wives he left behind. And then he read me names, and I was busily taking notes. It turns out that the whole attitude that we now have about the Tawaif, which narrative has changed with, scholars working on this, was that, these women are kidnapped. They are taken away from their homes at age 5. Then they are sold in the bazaar, auctioned off. Their virginity is taken by whoever the highest bidder is. Some of it is, in fact, that way, but not all. And it was the alternative that was more interesting. It was also said that, these women just live in these kothas, they entice men, they bring them from the street, they wink from the, upar se aankh jhapatke, people come up, they extract money, and they have, sex is the only thing on offer. I had some of these prejudices myself when I walked in. This young research assistant, I just said, I want to write your name and make some sort of a professional commitment to how much you'll get paid for helping me and so on. So if you'll start with your name. And his surprising answer was, I don't have a name. So I said, excuse me, you don't have a name? He said, nahi, मैं क्या बताऊँ आपको, मैं एक तवाइफ के घर पैदा हुआ. I'm sure everyone here speaks or understands Urdu. I mean, this is the land of Bollywood, so has to be. मैं तवाइफ के घर पैदा हुआ, मेरा नाम नहीं है. I don't know who my father is. So I said, really? He said, आप अगर जानना चाहती हैं हमारी history, तो आप जाएं हमारी नानी से बात करें. And that is the nani of who became my chief informant, though she introduced me to 35 others, and we had long conversations. From about 1976 to 84, whenever I came to India, I would visit and spend several afternoons just delving into their worldview. And that is where I found original feminism. The way I define feminism is not what, some of you might think, oh, those bra-burning harpies, those lesbians, those women who go around hating men. That's not feminism. The way to understand it, most simply, is to look at the relationship of power to gender. And if you understand those equations, you know you have a feminist perspective. Any man can be as good a feminist as a woman, if you understand those. And these women introduced me into a very unique perspective on gender and power. And for that, I'm very grateful. So they began to talk. Now we'll just skip to the talk because this boy said, look at my sister. She's had the property, she's had jewelry, she's had education. 3 Maulvis are teaching her Urdu and Persian. She's very learned. I was just left. I was given a scholarship in the university, and that's how I'm even in the university. No one is ready to pay for me. So I said, this is turning the equation. Normally, he said, जब लड़की पैदा होती है ढोलक बजते हैं लड्डू बांटे जाते हैं. मैं लड़का था, मुझे छज्जे पे छोड़ दिया, नाम भी नहीं दिया. So I said, this is a world I don't know. I have to go and explore it, because this is like some dream, that women might have. कि हम जब पैदा हो तो गाना baje. When I met these women, they lived that tale. They just sat there, they were so comfortable. You know, they were having hookah, they pandan, wonderful snacks, this and that when I went. So they said, I hope you're not from the government, because government has made us illegal. You know, the acts of the British from 1862, the Infectious Diseases Act, and then the Indian government just outlawed it altogether. So they said, we are sitting here in this quota, but we are completely illegal. So please don't write or anything. They took away my tape recorder, my notebook. I had to keep everything in my head. So I was very alert, and I did not fall for the, kabhi opium hai, kabhi pinak, kabhi. They were giving me all kinds of pills, and I didn't take them because they weren't sure who I was. I came, and I wasn't ready to tell them that I'm a Lucknowi. I kept a remote persona of being a researcher. Now, they totally disabused me of the very prejudices that I had walked in with. I said, आप लोग तो सब kidnap करती रहती हैं बच्चियों को और फिर बेच देती हैं बाजार में. So she said, she gestured, and about 5-6 other women came in and sat with us. She said, ask them, who kidnapped them? Who brought them here? And then I began to hear the stories of marital abuse, rape within the family, young women who had been mistreated, who ran away, who were not kidnapped, who had run away. And I've in my work, I've mentioned, I've given their stories there as they were told to me. So the woman who was telling me this was 72 years old. She had 3 teeth. I still remember her smile. It was a most amazingly dazzling smile with only 3 teeth. And she was making a pan for me. And she said, Dekhiye. The second prejudice, I said, aap hongi, you're dependent on men. You're dependent on their patronage to sustain you. So you're still a pillar of the patriarchy. So she said, देखिए, मुफ्त का काम कोई नहीं होता है. I said, you have to sell your bodies. I made this terrible mistake of saying you have to sell your bodies. So they looked at me and they said, what do you do? I said, I do research. आपने कहा ना आपको fellowship मिला है. I said, जी. So he said, you have sold your mind. क्योंकि आप लिख रही हैं कुछ. आपने अपना मगज बेच दिया. आप हमसे कह रही हैं हम अपना जिस्म बेच रहे हैं. It was so powerful, that pointer, that I just said, I'm humbled. I'm really humbled, but I'm speaking for that very naive society outside these walls who think like this. I'm only reflecting what they think. I have no independent means of knowing how you think of yourselves. So please keep educating me. I will improve my manners 100-fold. So then then I said something about, she said, देखिए, what we earn, we have converted into factories. निवार की factory है, samai की factory है, perfume है. We have created about 6 itars which are sold by Muhammad Ali, Asghar Ali, Muhammad Ali. All the major Begumate Awadh were wearing those perfumes. We have created designs for clothing. And jo Lucknow ka khas, churidar and that sort of skirt, that is their clothing. They used to wear that. I've got a few sets. I didn't wish to wear it today, but I can tell you that they were made by them. They embroidered them, they made them. They said we were the keepers of fashion. Cuisine. They said, jo yahan ke khushboo wale pulao or golauti kebab वगैरह, she said, whoever came here didn't come here just for sex. They came for food, for music, for conversation. Because we are the only women who can talk not just about, we can talk about the poets. We know from Mirza Ghalib, Mir, we know the novelists, we know, they were really highly educated women. And not with degrees from universities, but really rich, culturally rich. Then the burqa. I said, when I said I want to visit other kothas, there were just 2 others that were still partly functional when I was doing my work. And they said, we'll take you there. And I just stood up. I said, chaliye. So they said, no, you can't go like this. You have to wear a burqa. I said, ye to patriarchal imposition hai, but I'm not going to wear a burqa. So she said, you know something? आप उन पे नजर डालेंगे, वो आप पे नजर नहीं डाल सकते. They completely reversed what we have called the male gaze. They had the female gaze. He said, चलिए आप जब, in the kunchas and gullies of Lucknow, you hear very sweet remarks. You don't hear crude ones, but some men can be very crude. When a woman is walking, they say, "Arey, zulfe," they, what you hear in films, they now repeat. So when I went in the burqa, I really felt empowered because I could see all the men and they couldn't see me. And I started to pass remarks because these women say, I had nali mein phek dugi. They do all sorts of very strong threats about anyone who comes in their way. Rickshaw wale, dekh raha hai, abhi ulta do teri rickshaw. And she's holding on to the handlebars. So I then realized that this burqa gives these women, they said, देखो, मुफ्त में हमारा शक्ल किसी ने नहीं देखी, हो ही नहीं सकता. हम क्या सड़कों पे घूमेंगे अपनी शक्ल दिखाते हुए? देखने जाते हैं क्या हो रहा है, दिखाते नहीं हैं. So I came back really with my head spinning, saying, here's another. And the last one, and after this I'll stop, rest assured. I said, अच्छा आपके पास property है, आपके पास इज्जत है, the whole nobility comes and sits here and eats and drinks and watches you and applauds and throws gold asharfis at you. All that is given. But what about that other thing that I have? I was married then and married to the same person now. I said, the person you love, the person you can be with and call your own and depend on, and there's something emotionally spectacular about that kind of relationship. So they looked at me like I was completely mad. They said, "आप क्या समझी? क्या हमने कभी इश्क नहीं किया?" I said, नहीं, I mean, आपने बहुतों से किया होगा. So she looks at this woman, Rasulan Bai, has been sitting all along with her, and smiling and making pan ki gilori and offering it and saying, ordering the servants. She was like the manager. She said, "Inse puchiye, for 40 years we have been together, and there's no deeper love and no better ishq than this. This is the ishq that has no name. We call it lesbianism, we call it this and that." I said, "Iska koi naam hota hai?" She said, "Iska naam sirf ek hai, mohabbat." I was really blown away by now, and I said, I will go and write a brand new story about you people. And that's what I finally did when I got the courage as an academic and a respected urban historian to actually sit down and write my first feminist piece. And that is what explains my presence here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Veena ji. I also wanted to, we were talking about earlier as well, about, how they told you all about their high income status and they being the highest taxpayers at one point, and what were the lifestyles and the status of these women at that point? Yes.
Well, you know how things have changed for them. It's not just the bias of society, but after the British took over Awadh in 1856 and exiled, you know, Wajid Ali Shah was exiled to Matya Burj, in fact, which is a suburb of Calcutta, it is a suburb of Calcutta. And what had happened, what the British, after the mutiny was over, by the way, I have to say that Lucknow was the place where the longest siege of any British garrison took place in the history of the British Empire, which spans every continent, which spans every, 4 centuries. The only place that stood up to them for 14 months is Lucknow. So I'm a very, modestly telling you this about what we Lucknowis are worth. What happened with the mutiny was, what came to light with the British taking figures and facts, sort of reflecting on this huge, long resistance to their rule, they discovered that a lot of British soldiers, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and English, few English, mainly their own local colonials who had served in the army, had died not in combat, but with venereal disease. That was rampant in the garrison. Secondly, they discovered that when they took over Lucknow, they wanted to know who owns these properties, who are the taxpayers. So they made a list. And I have seen, that was part of my work in the archive, of 1862, the first list of taxpayers in the city was created by the British. The top rank, they ranked everyone by income. And the top rank were what they called singing and dancing girls. And the highest income was 7,000 rupees a month, which was, I'm sure they gave a very reduced figure because they were going to be taxed on it. They knew about double bookkeeping right from the start. Just like the jewelers are claiming 2,000 rupees a month income, which is hard to believe even in those days. So I saw that. Then I found a list of the ransacking of Kaisar Bagh. Kaisar Bagh was a huge palace with 85 apartments in it, where Wajid Ali Shah's mutahi wives, nikah ke to 4 hoti hain wives, 4 ho sakti hain simultaneously. But nikahi wives are only among the Shia, and those are contracted for limited periods of time. So Wajid Ali Shah never wanted to commit adultery. What he would do if he fancied a woman is to marry her first. तो वो मुता लिखते थे, मुता नामा लिखा जाता था, and it could be for anything from 20 years, 25 years के भी देखे मैंने, but they could also be for 5 hours, 10 hours, 12 days. कि मुता सिर्फ उतना ही है, and he only slept with them in the period of the muta, which was a very conscientious. And what was great about the muta is that you muh manga likhwana, meaning जो मेहर देते हैं, in a marriage, in a nikahi shadi, you give a meher, and you. So the mutahi, in the nikahi wedding, you get a meher up front. It's written down, and you're given your money right at the start. In a nikahi wedding, wo muh manga nikah. Now some woman will say, okay, you want to have this relationship with me, I'll sign the nikah-nama, but I want that manzil in Kaisar Bagh, or I want it in Aminabad. Or the
lands by the
orchards, lands by the river, ke hum Dhobighat ki leases, are all owned by the Tawaifs. You know, the dhobis are paying them currency, also ironing their clothes without any money and washing their clothes and doing all this. They would have in the Chowk Bazaar, बहुत से बाजार हैं लखनऊ में, but the Chowk was the main bazaar in those days, and they would have these shops. They would just say, हमें 4 दुकानें दे दीजिए. So each woman, and I saw these 85 mutanamas, which I, had, which my friend from the Persian department was reading for me. कितना पैसा मिला, कितना वो, सब लिखा हुआ है. It's an amazing archive of knowledge. And I learned about the Muta, I learned how these women had become, and these became his wives. They were not given the title Begum, they just kept Mahal, M-A-H-A-L, or sometimes Begum, but that title expired with the expiry of the Mutanama. And so you get a huge list. Then there was another list which the British made of the raid on the Kaisar Bagh, where they collected gold, jewelry, silver, ivory-handled fly whisks, gold and silver hookahs of the ladies' variety, slippers of gold, everything made of valuable, emeralds, diamonds, rubies, pearl strings, जो बसरा से आते थे, huge, 6 and 8 layers of pearls. Some were even pictured. They had people draw them. They were not photographs, they were drawings, sketches of jewelry, because all this had to be sent to the crown in England, because that was the deal, because the crown soldiers had come to relieve Lucknow, not the East India Company army, but the actual British soldiers came because they just could not defeat the rebels in Lucknow. So वो crown ले गई, and उसकी फहरिस्त रह गई है सिर्फ. 26 barrels of jewels were removed from Kaisar Bagh alone. So if you want to picture their lifestyle, you have to just read those lists. I used to be mesmerized by just reading the lists. Saat ladi, Basra ke, itne, so many millimeters. You know how the British measure and write everything. They're very good at making these taxonomies of
and thank
plants
God for those
and anything.
lists,
Knowledge is power, as you know.
Yeah.
And so they were very much into gathering precise knowledge about us.
Thank you so much. And now, then there was the shift in perspective. So what happened was that having lived these lifestyles, having earned this kind of money and land, and, when the British came, they changed the whole thing. They segregated. Yes. So that is something that Lata ji has talked about, and if I can bring her into the discussion, if you don't mind. So that is something that Lata ji has written about in her book, Raising the Curtain, where she talks of how the British actually, with the purpose of segregation initially, because of the venereal disease that the soldiers were contracting, they decided to kind of, move them away. So if you could talk a little about that and how...
She has all.
Yes.
Just to go back, there's a, if you look at the entire historical trajectory, you start from Ganikas, Amrapali, Vaishali ki Nagar Badhu, Mrich Katika, the play which is on Vasant Sena, you feel, these women had in brief, had a status, social status, they had a political status. They were also, as we moved towards the medieval era, when they were referred to as Tawaifs, that they were part of the rich courtly culture of that period. And in fact, initially, even the initial phase when the British came, we know from record, that most of the prince and princely courts and all would send their sons to learn the language, the mannerism,
that was their status, even the political status within the court, and some of them were the highest nobility also. Mahalaka Bai, if you see from Hyderabad, they were the Umrah, they were, along with her went the soldiers. She was fighting along with the kings, on the battlefield. None of the women were going to the battlefield. Many of these courtesans, like Malika Pukhraj, if you read her, they were all accompanying the kings along. So, and in the initial phase of the British period also, it's not that, the shift within towards them builds up around the period, by 1850s and 40s it starts. Initially,
this was after the mutiny?
Mutiny. That Pran Neville's work has shown that, the Britishers were also like that the Nashtar, that famous novel, talks about how the British would also be offering them, inviting them for ceremonies, or, so they were, even the English women would be also, so there was something called the culture, if you want to know the culture, the most literate, as she says, the first generation of literate women, because we start every history with colonial modernity, as if, the modern education. So it is gradually what happens, initially this whole racial feelings, initially when the British were coming, they were not bringing their wives along, women around. So they have, they have left wills, many of the British officers have left wills behind, which talks about these relationships without looking down upon them. That's an era when, you have in England also, there's a whole discourse around prostitution as a criminal community is also building up. And that's the discourse of the Victorian morality and the colonial modernity. And obviously the 1850s, 57, as she says, Sabse, even if you pick up Umrao Jan, you'll find that, they were attacking these quotas. Why were these quotas being attacked? So they were also looked upon as very political women also of that
they were
period.
Political influencers also.
So gradually that kind of a morality discourse builds up unfortunately with the formation of our own Indian middle class, the social reformers like Brahmo Samaj, Keshav Chandra Sen. The other day I was telling you, I was reading Nana Devi's autobiography, memoir by Vidya Rao.
Yeah.
And she's her name is Nilina Sen. She's married to a Prince Roy. But when she starts Tumri, she has to change the name. And she's the granddaughter of Keshav Chandra Sen, who has written against this culture of Tawaifs and all, very strongly in the history. So the whole, both our own middle class modernity, the social reformers, and the colonial discourse, they build around during that period. And gradually from the category, they start getting under the umbrella of the prostitutes now. That's, what Veena ji said, that, that was 1857 में ब्रिटिश को ये लगता था कि हमारे ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा सोल्जर्स कंटेजियस डिजीज़ एक्ट से ही मर रहे हैं, venereal disease and lock hospitals, उनके surveillance. And when they could not, then they realized that let's bring. So that's the period when these courtesans and all starts getting under the category of the prostitution and as a war, and the objectifications and all starts. No, though there have been, during the British period, we do have Gauhar Jan, we have Malika Pukhraj and all these. We have Rasulan Bai from Lucknow and all that. These were the very, very defined women of their time. If you look at the life of Gauhar Jan and all, she was defying the British. She was कैरेज में चार कैरेज मतलब घोड़ों के साथ जाती थी उन सड़कों पे जहाँ पे these women were not allowed, and she was ready to pay the fine, And if you look at Malika Pukhraj also, so but somewhere down the line the patronage of that patron now stops, and with the decline of the princely states and all that, and the new emerging middle class, bourgeois class in the cities, merchant class and all. So that's the time when the art shifts from art to manoranjan also. Some people, it's not so much.
So going further, how are we going to talk about how did they break these economic and gender stereotypes and this segregation? So how did they turn the patriarchal values around? And
I'll pick up from where Veena ji, I'll pick up from where Veena ji has talked about. We were, in the women's movement, we were also, I feel we have amnesia of the feminist issues. We start on the issue of sexuality as if, it starts with the sexuality right movements. Oh, no, these women were transgressing. Where do you place them, And if you look at the writings, creative writings also, the poetry is full of eroticism. And one of the famous Tawaif from Hyderabad, from Travancore, Mudupalani, she has written a manuscript in 1870s on Radhika Santavana, where she says Radha desires for sexual desire. She's at those times. So they, in one of the sense, even if you go, as she says, the notion of the marriage, the notion of family, the notion of man as a bread earner, all these in the notion of the domesticity. In that front also, they are really transgressing many of the boundaries at that particular point in the history about it,
Right. So we're saying that they're subverting the patriarchal values, because they're turning this concept of the breadwinners on its head, so to speak.
As she says, they were the tax.
She says,
highest, they were the first professional
But we must keep in mind that they were performing primarily, even as courtesans, they were performing predominantly for a male audience, right? So, and when that moves to the British era and then subsequent years. So we are now coming to the male gaze, which is now looking at them only as sex workers and as prostitutes. So their whole position has changed. So how are they now protecting it?
Well, I want to just backtrack a little to show how the British actually take this, strike at the root of this profession and virtually destroy it. When they discovered that venereal disease was so rampant in their own barracks, they created, and for those of you who read history here probably know this, that they created 110 specific cantonments attached to cities in India. 110. For each cantonment, they decided that because there is venereal disease, we must bring healthy, disease-free women to the cantonment and create what was later called the Lal Bazaar, the red street, because they used to put a red light at the beginning of the street so that the soldier would know where it is, and he could only visit these women. They fixed the rates of how, they did it exactly with time and value. It was not, no song and dance. Song and dance vanished. It was sex. There was a tablet on the door which said, 10 minutes, 8 annas. 20 minutes, 2 rupees, us zamane ke paise. And the whole chart of that, I took a picture of one which was still existent in the Sadar Bazaar. And in these Sadar Bazaars, meaning these cantonment bazaars, this is what happened. So these women's quotas were more or less destroyed because what excuse did they have to destroy them? Well, they discovered and imputed, sometimes even falsely, that these women have been supplying the rebels with money, food, resources, and shelter. Because when they would go to find the rebels, they couldn't find them. So they said, ye sab kothe mein chupe. They run off and hide in the kothas. So the kothas, they got warrants for full search, for destruction. They would break the furniture, they would do this, do that. and leave them completely bare so that no one could hide there. Curtains were pulled down and, the areas where the kothas themselves used to have their own prostitutes. After all, they were not just tawaifs, but they were also what they called randi and khangi and various levels of women. Everything was destroyed to keep themselves safe. My chapter is "The City Must Be Safe," and in which I have discussed plenty of all this in my Lucknow book.
Okay,
So that is the background of how the Tawaif culture was really just actually physically dismembered.
Yeah, taking it from your ye baat sach hai, these Tawaifs were performing, these Tawaifs were definitely performing for an audience in the courts, which was male. Let's be, Vidyara, who's performed, says that it was they were ये औरतें देखती थी तो चिलमनी जिस तरह से, and in many of these houses of even Keshav Chandra Sen's houses and all had a concerts where the women were not. So definitely they were performing for the male audience. One cannot deny. And the form of Thumri also is a form which is full of feminine, female desire, which you're performing for the men also. Yeah. But the thing is, also interestingly, would you be just reading it like, very simplistic way of saying, oh, they were catering to the male desire after all. It was not so, because, people who have been like Vidya Raut, if you look at her work, is also Thumri, which has come from that work of these Tawaifs, Gharanas, and Nana Devi and all says, and they were. The form, it's the music itself, some of the Tawaifs, they say in the interview, कि उनको लगता है मैं उनके लिए गा रही हूँ, सबको लगता है मैं individual. But, they underplay a lot of emotions, lot of complexities and all that. Definitely, I would like to say when we are very much fascinated by the concept called male gaze, but male gaze also has a structure, social structure. These were very powerful women, And what I see today in many of the forms which is happening in Tamasha and, Nautanki, in Sonpur Mela, वगैरह, this was not, These women had a control. It's not that, So
are you saying that they were perpetuating the male gaze themselves at some point?
They were talking about the sexual, they were talking about
because
the desire.
They were empowered.
If the desire, where do you bring the whole category of desire, sexuality? Where do you, does it have a patriarchal form? Is it for that? So, most of the singers would not, when they were performing, like Gaurjan down to Malka Pukraj, down to many others, such as Rasool and Bai and all these people. It's not, the other day in the Indian International Center, it was said that, Rajan Mishra ji said that, Husna Bai ko log Banaras mein sarkar कहते थे. तो यो gaze किस point में है, क्या context है, कैसे हैं? So it has a lot of complexities around, and most of these are very, very powerful political women. Malika Pukhraj would say कि मुझे आपने 9 से मैं 2 घंटे रहूँगी 9 से 11. उसके बाद मैं बिल्कुल नहीं रुक सकती हूँ. Gaurjan did have a say where she wants to go and perform, where she did not. It's later what we find the entire patronage shifting, मतलब आपके एक mercantile community, business community, shifts gradually starts taking. So we need to problematize the question of the male gaze also vis-a-vis these Tawaif, what I find,
Thank you.
And I want to just add that among the many things that changed, Bollywood, which wasn't called Bollywood then, it was just called Bombay cinema. The cinema itself has been something that both imitated sort of the love tropes of the Tawaif and also destroyed them, because they brought it into middle-class love affairs and, and so on. And you could, you know, being from a city where the most films are made on this planet, that a lot of it is faked. I mean, nobody is really falling in love, and nobody is really having this, pangs, and nobody's really dying when they die. It's acting. And these kotas were stages for such human emotions. I mean, they were not always crazy about every man who's sitting there. They might have loved one or none. And still they could perform. And that is the part of the performance which is very under-recognized. Performance is seen as song and dance. But what they're really performing is this emotional sort of capture, this emotional blackmail that they are performing on you. You think they're, as, I think I've quoted that, they think that when we see them, we are sighing for the love of them. And we are dangling our legs in the well of the, the property, sitting at the edge of the well, ready to commit suicide because the man did not look at us. But we were faking it. Hamara nakhra tha. और वो नखरे को लेके घूम रहे हैं तो फिर उनकी, that's their problem. Yeah. So there's that aspect, and certainly the films prove it. And the films have replaced basically this kind of entertainment.
Entertainment, right.
And the cricket match has replaced a lot of patronage because they go off and, so the new, the modern forms of entertainment struck at the heart of this very sophisticated and time-consuming and elaborate. Everyone wants to see a film. Ab yahan ki, the reason why Indian films don't do well in America is nobody wants to sit for more than 2 hours in the cinema hall. So their films are 1 hour and 48 minutes, or 1 hour and 58 minutes. It will be less than 1 hour, 2 hours. Here, to 3.5 घंटे भी चल सकता है, and you have 2 intervals and all this stuff.
अब छोटी बनने लगी.
So they're making them.
So with that, we'll open it up to the audience in case audience has some questions.
One line I'll add, Manjula, before. The transition, what I wanted to bring, beautifully from Tawaif, the dance, Mujra in Bihar. I come from a Bihar, jahan pe kehte Mujra, and फिर item girls, and the transition towards the Bagal, the city where we are. So why at every... And there's some number 2, in the history of cinema, writing of cinema is so patriarchal. Many of these earlier producers and directors came from, composers of music and all came from Tawaif's family, which has not been
someone like Jagan Bai, Nargis's mother, who didn't want Nargis to get into that profession, and so she trained her differently. So we could now open it up to the audience. Any questions? Do I see a hand going up? Yes, please. Could somebody hand her a mic, please? Over here, right in the front, 3rd row.
Actually, it's like a performance. You can't see their eyes.
I was interested in knowing where... Could you speak a bit louder, please? I was interested in knowing where I could find books on these subjects. Who are you? Okay. So who are you asking? Veena ji or Lata ji? Because, when I go to a regular bookshop, I can't find any books. So where can I find these books?
Where to physically locate these books, or you?
No, I want to buy them, or I want to read them. Even in libraries, I have not been able to find them. Well, some they have already written. I know. So you can.
No. We have also.
Later,
it's not.
There are other books.
We have taken also from
other books. Exactly. So
exactly. We have taken a lot from. It's not our knowledge has not come with the legacy of the knowledge given to us.
Absolutely.
At
least in Bombay, I have not been able to find. Maybe in Delhi, it would be possible.
Well, if I may be crassly commercial, Amazon.com.in will give you almost anything that you wish to buy.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And, you can take the names of the authors and then you can find them. And the work that I was talking of is actually a short article. It's only about 35 pages. And it first appeared in Feminist Studies, which is a journal in the US.
Yes.
And subsequently, it has been anthologized in many volumes, and in long form and short form and so on. Yeah. But if you send me an email, I'll be happy to send you a PDF.
Certainly, I'll meet you and get your email ID. Thank you. Yes. Anyone else? Yeah, okay. Could you pass the mic here, please, to this lady in the sari? Here, third row.
मेरा नाम अमिता चौधरी है, मैं लखनऊ की रहने वाली हूँ। तो एक बात मैं और भी कहना चाहूँगी कि जैसा कि बताया कि वो बहुत लिटरेट थी, बहुत कल्चर्ड थी लेडीज़, उनका बहुत बड़ा हाथ है हमारे सोशल सर्कल या सोशल स्टेटस या सोशल नेटवर्क उस वक्त कैसा था या हमारी लिविंग कैसी थी, वो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन प्रॉपर किसी हिस्टोरियन ने नहीं किया होगा जितना कि इन लोगों ने लिखा है। काफ़ी कंपोजिशंस भी इन लोगों ने की हैं। तो उस समय हम लोग कैसे रहते थे और परिवार की क्या स्थिति होती थी, हर चीज़ उन्होंने कोठों के ही बारे में नहीं लिखी थी। जैसे बहुत सिंपल, अभी हम इंटर किए तो एक सॉन्ग चल रहा था, उठो एलबेली बुहार ले अंगना, तो वो हमारा कल्चर था लखनऊ का। जब हम उठते थे सबसे पहले कोई भी लेडी होती थी वो अपना आंगन साफ करती थी, और ये बहुत बड़ी बात थी। ऐसा कि अभी बोलते हैं कि लेडीज़ को बहुत ज़्यादा इज्जत नहीं दी जाती थी, बहुत नहीं पूछा जाता था, ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं था। जो पारिवारिक, जो परिवार में सब लोग साथ मिलकर रहते थे, उसमें किसी भी बेटी को, किसी भी बहू को बहुत अच्छे से आदर सम्मान दिया जाता था जी। और हम ये सब नहीं था, जैसा कि ये चीज़ बाद में आई है कि जैसे बोलते हैं कि प्रताड़ना दी गई हो और दहेज दिया हो, ये सब कल्चर नहीं था। ये सब चीज़ें इन लोग के सॉन्ग्स में से निकल के आती हैं। तो ये बहुत बड़ा डॉक्यूमेंटेशन है।
वीना जी ने वही बताया था शुरू में कि इनका लेवल, पोजीशन, स्टेटस, इकोनॉमिक स्टेटस, अदरवाइज
नहीं, इनका तो था ही, इनका तो था ही जो जनरल पब्लिक के बारे में, जनरल पब्लिक की जो लिविंग स्टाइल थी, जो परिवार में क्या संबंध होते थे।
मैं बताना चाहूँगी।
आपका कोई सवाल है तो बताइए मैम, नहीं तो कमेंट में तो अभी थोड़ा समय
व्हाट आई कैन गेन गैदर फ्रॉम हर, इनके कहना, जो चीज़ ये सच है कि जो पॉपुलर कल्चर है, जो धरोहर है, इट हैज़ कम फ्रॉम वुमेन। हमारे घरों में भी, बिहारों में भी ये पूरी की पूरी जो है एक स्पेस थी जो महिलाओं का, आई मीन इवन ऑर्डिनरी वुमेन जो गाते थे वगैरह वगैरह, उनको तवाइफे भी लेते थे, तवाइफे भी। तो वो जो है किस तरह से अब इतिहास के कल्चरल कैनन में अब किसे हम ऊपर रख रहे हैं, उस्ताद और मैस्कुलिन आर्टिस्ट को, और किस तरह से, बट मोस्ट ऑफ दीज एक्चुअली जेनर्स हैव कम। आई मीन इफ़ यू गो टू, आप महाराष्ट्र में तमाशा देखिएगा, पूरी की पूरी लावनी, वो सारी कल्चर हैज़ बीन गिवन बाय द वुमेन बोथ। I mean, the so-called, it's a construction of a good and bad women, there's nothing called good or bad women at some particular point. So that is true what you're saying is, and they have also picked up. The wives also picked up from the various regions, their dress style, their, the cuisines, their, all that, which is true, I mean.
Ji, could you take it to that lady who's raised her hand there for fifth row, fifth or sixth row?
Hi, my question is that could you tell us a bit about if the Tawaifs played any role in the mutiny? Like a little bit more about that?
In the mutiny?
Yes, indeed. The Tawaifs, well, they were patently non-combatants. They did not come out and fight. But what they did do, and this is why they were so brutally punished by the British, they actually harbored rebels. They sustained them with money. They hid guns, and cannon were found in the Kaisarbagh apartments. A lot of cannon showed up, which they used to blast troop movements and so on. So that their role was very constructive and completely anti-British, because they saw their own livelihoods endangered, that these people are picking up, their women were picked up. They took all the women, they took 100 women in. I've written about the Lucknow cantonment because I did that directly. They took 100 women who they called fat and fair. They wanted light-skinned and plump. Why plump? Was that sort of a characteristic of beauty that was admired. No. Fat, because you won't have TB or you won't have the diseases that were rampant. They were terrified. So if it's a really fat and fair woman, she's healthy and she will be safe. They had this.
That's good news.
So that was, you know, and there was a huge protest, even against house tax. One of the first marching protests in the city of Lucknow by women was done by the Tawaifs, because they would not want to pay the tax. And when they, on their incomes, they told me, they said, we kept 2 books, 2 registers, one for ourselves to know what we actually made, and one for them, कि falana 5 rupaye de gaya, falana 10 rupaye de gaya. They would keep a register and then show it to the tax collector. So they had a very important role in supplying money and shelter, because where were these rebels going to hide? Only where there's a parda, where's parda nashin women, in the begums' quarters where men could not go. And the khwajas, you know, the eunuchs used to look after them and stand at their gates. All the guards were khwajas, meaning eunuchs or whatever, the castrati or whatever they were. So unke piche unhone.
You know, I mean, Azizan Bai, I have written a piece on Azizan Bai on 1857 revolt in Kanpur. Hazrat Mahal, who was she? In 1857, she was a Tawaif, you know. So we do have, even the British records, and even the, you know, Trevelyan has talked about Azizan Bai in Kanpur in 1857. So we need to now re-look at our own sources in history. What are the voices we want to hear, and what are the voices in our writing of history we want to invisibilize? I mean, it is contemporarily now people want to bring out the voices of these women, you know. So it's also in the writing of history whose voices has been marginalized and why at particular point has been marginalized, you know.
Thank you. So with just one last question, we have time only for one question, please. Yeah, the gentleman, he's been raising his hand since the beginning. Right, you. That's the bearded gentleman. Yeah, thank you.
Hi.
We can chat later with them. They'll be here for some time, but we have to start the next session. So just one more question.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. During your research, did you ever come across the wives of Hira Mandi? Any researches about Hira Mandi? What was
Could you hold the mic closer to yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now,
so during your researches, did you ever come across research about the wives of Hira Mandi?
Lahore. Neville, who used to be like an uncle to me, who died only last year, has written on Hira Mandi.
Oh.
And his work is, and he was himself, as he quite happily tells you, was himself someone who went there. And
Fauzia's work in Pakistani right women.
What was the name of the author?
The Notch Girls of India?
No, it's not Notch Girls.
No.
Taboo.
Fran Neville's work.
Fran Neville's work is Notch Girls. I mean, Manjari
Notch
will tell you
Girls
better.
Fran Neville's work is called The Notch Girls of India.
He has written also a abridged version, which is, you know, first was a very beautifully visuals and detailed, and his also abridged version is also there.
But how different was the culture of the Tawaifs in Hira Mandi and Lucknow?
Lucknow had a very Persianized accent because of, you know, the whole, the dynastic connection was from Persia. You know, the first was Behram Khan, who came from Persia, became a Mughal general, and later on the Prime Minister of India. And his court, and uske baad Asaf-ud-Daula, and then a string of 9 Nawabs who, with varying tenure, were all kept up Persian. The court language was Persian, and the cuisine was very influenced by fragrances which were, you know, they didn't have very hot things, but very fragrant use of food and clothing and so on. So,
right.
But Lahore has a more Punjabi, much more, shall we say, robust style, not as delicate. हम लखनऊ की बात करते हैं तो कहते हैं कि लखनऊ में रसगुल्ले भी छील के खाए जाते हैं. We sit there and we brood over it. अब पंजाबी से ये कहिए तो वो हंसेगा. ये क्या? दो मुझे रसगुल्ला and 6 will go into his mouth in one shot. So it's a very different world in Lahore.
And
but I'd like to add, Lahore
but please note the name.
Lahore has given you the most cultural.
If you know French.
You know, आपके बॉलीवुड सिनेमा के जो शुरुआत के दौर पे सब लोग लाहौर से आए हैं. It was a very important 1940s के समय में. It was one of the important center of art, painting, music and literature, you know.
All your matinee
so one
idols
has to
were
look at
Punjabis.
I really must wrap it up. I'm sorry. We have. We'll do it later. We have to start the next session, please. Just think. So.
It was in relation to what you said in the end, the kotha being a stage and that emotional blackmail and the desire being created. So my question was, I'm a Kathak dancer.
Yes.
In your research, have you come across any techniques that the Tawaifs have mentioned about their own practice and training into what riyaz they did in order to create that sattva, create that desire?
I have written briefly about it under, in my questions with Gul Badan, my main informant, about the nakhre, कि हमारे क्या नखरे हैं. जैसे एक नवाब आए और उन्होंने आपने उनका पैसा वगैरह ले लिया, and then you say, आज मेरे पीठ में इतनी दर्द है, and then you do this, then you do that, and the poor man just sits there. He says, कई लोग यहाँ 3-3 दिन बैठे रहे, हमारा दर्द नहीं गया, सर का दर्द नहीं. And so they did all this tamashas to create a sort of not just desire, but how hard to get they were. There was no such thing as just selling your wares,
There was also this instance where you say, किसी ने हाथ पकड़ लिया तो बड़ी नज़ाकत से वो हाथ हटा लिया उन्होंने.
इसने नैना देवी ने अपनी उसमें विद्या राव में लिखा है कि वो जब देख रही थी परफॉर्मेंस बैनर एक तवाइफ का, तो गाते गाते अचानक किसी ने राजा उनका हाथ पकड़ा, बड़ी नज़ाकत से उसने, she gave the message, don't touch my hand, but she did not discontinue with the performance.
Right.
That was.
So thank you so much. Thank you, Veena ji. Thank you, Lata ji. I think we had a wonderful session.